I want to welcome all of you to this session. It is Disability Inclusion and Adventure Programming, and I'm going to let Adam introduce himself in just a second. But my name is Kelly McMahon, and I am a member and a fellow board member with the WA, serve on a lot of committees. I just can't get away from the WA. You know, that's a really good thing. But we do want to welcome you to the session and the conference. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Just want to remind you that the session is being recorded and will be available through Whova, I think for 6 months, if I have that correct. And just want to remind you that these sessions are short, and so keep your, we want to hear your comments. I know Adam does, so feel free to stick those in the chat box, and then there'll be time at the end and I will read some of those questions to your presenters. So Adam, I'll turn it over to you. And would you like for me to give you a time check?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll give you one about 5 minutes.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
5 minutes time check would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. Welcome everybody. Thanks for having us. I have to say, I would much rather be doing this in person, as I know everybody would. But nonetheless, we're excited to be here, excited to be talking a little bit about inclusion and accessibility for people with disabilities in outdoor adventure and recreation environments. My name's Adam Combs, as Anya said. This is Carly Pearson. Carly will be popping in and out. We'll both we're going to kind of do this tag team style, so we may be kind of popping in and out here. But we're here, as Anya said, on behalf of Catalyst Sports. Y'all, we have a lot of content to cover, and I hope you said, Anya, there's going to be a little bit of time at the end. I really hope there's going to be time at the end for questions. But we will be, since there's two of us, one of us will be fielding questions as best we can while the other person is presenting their sections. So feel free to keep dropping questions in as they come up. If we don't answer them right away, I think, Anya, you tell me, we should be able to answer those after the session and they'll be posted, correct?
Yeah, they're recorded.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll be fielding those as we can. So feel free to ask questions. In terms of content, let me flip to the next slide here and we'll show you a little bit about what we plan to cover. Ooh, there we go. So our objectives, can y'all see that? Everybody see the objectives? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay. So our objectives for this next hour are to cover the why, the what, and the how. Why should we be creating access for people with disabilities? What is a disability? We use that term a lot, and we're going to throw that term around quite a bit throughout this session. So what is a disability? We'll talk a little bit about the definition. And then for the last half, we are going to spend, I would say, maybe even a little bit more than the last half. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time on how. How do we create access? What are some practical steps we can take as facilitators or as organizations to begin creating access, to begin opening the doors to our programs and to our facilities? We feel like this is pretty important. You know, we can talk about why we should be including people all day, but when it comes to actually making that happen, we need to figure out what are the action steps we can take. And so we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that. Before we dive into all that content, let me back up and introduce us. Let us introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit more about Catalyst Sports as well. Again, my name's Adam, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Catalyst Sports. I've been involved in adaptive adventure programming for almost 20 years. I started with Catalyst Sports in June of 2020, so I'm fairly new to this organization and very excited to be a part of this great team. Prior to Catalyst, for the last 13 years, I have been living up in Boston, where I had the privilege of co-founding an organization called Waypoint Adventure. Waypoint's focus is to make adventure education programs accessible to youth and adults with disabilities as well. Catalyst Sports is an organization that does similar work to Waypoint. Our programming rests on the tenets of access, community, and impact, as you see here on the screen. Our mission is to give people with physical disabilities access to the life-changing impact of adventure sports within a supportive and inclusive community. Y'all, this mission is fueled on volunteers, quite honestly, a large team of trained volunteers who run adventure programs like rock climbing, kayaking, mountain biking, and hiking in 8 different cities throughout the Southeast, from Washington, D.C. down to Birmingham, Alabama. Speaking of volunteers, we have a superstar volunteer presenting with me today. This is Carly Pearson, has been involved with Catalyst since the beginning for the last 12 years. Sorry, for the last 8 years, I said.
Yeah,
13
since
years
2012.
Yeah, since 2012. That's where that number came from. Sorry. And Carly is actually currently helping us launch a new consulting program, a consulting arm, to support the efforts of other organizations, maybe yours, as well as municipalities and companies who want to become more accessible. So without further ado, let me turn things over to Carly for a little bit, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself and her story as a way to lead into this disability inclusion conversation.
All right, scoot on over there, Adam.
Sorry.
How are you guys? I'm so grateful to be here today. And because we're on a time crunch, and I normally don't do this, but I have to be very limited in what I tell you with my story so that we can get the content in for explaining disability and inclusion. So I'm going to actually read to you some of my story, and I hate to do that, but I don't want to leave anything out. So just bear with me as I go through this, and then we'll get back into the content. So I'm going to take you back on a little journey in time with me. It was a peaceful and serene morning. As the sun started to set, or to peek up over the mountain, I stretched and shook off the soreness from sleeping on the hard ground. I had been deployed enough times in my fire career to learn that if I got up early enough, even on a large fire like this one, that I could still squeeze in my morning runs without getting in trouble or being late to the safety briefing. I threw on my running clothes and my New Balance tennis shoes and took off from my tent and ran down the long gravel road that was part of our makeshift helibase in the middle of the Umpqua National Forest. Running was my escape and always kept me grounded. I just accidentally messed that up. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So,
I'll stay with you here.
yeah, it was easy, and there was never an excuse for not running to keep in shape. And I love being outdoors and in nature. Growing up on a farm in East Tennessee afforded me the opportunity to become very acquainted with the outdoors. We had horses, cattle, dogs, cats, and a garden that all had to be cared for. So my mom would literally throw us out in the morning and tell us not to come back until dinner. During that time as a kid, I also spent many days shooting basketball and playing sports with my siblings. This led me to be a multi-sport athlete in middle school and high school. And one of those sports was track. And that is how I became came to love running. And that morning, as I returned from my run, I quickly changed back into my fire uniform and headed back to the main camp for the morning briefing. The smoke was very thick. The firefighters all standing around with their hot coffee, listening to the incident commander. And I noticed this chorus of coughs. And in all the fire assignments I had ever been on, I had never heard the firefighters coughing this bad. And the reason it was because the smoke was so thick and it was lingering really low in the atmosphere, in the air. That was day 7 of the fire assignment for me. And as in the days preceding, all aviation support had been grounded until the smoke cleared and moved up into the atmosphere. So essentially we had been placed on standby, meaning we had to be ready to go into service at any minute, but we weren't able to fly because the smoke was so bad. After high school, I thought my path was to follow in my parents' footsteps, so I went to Mississippi State and majored in animal science. I was sitting in anatomy and physiology of farm animals when it suddenly occurred to me that this is not what I was cut out for, because I did not want to be cutting open abscesses on pigs and cows. So while I loved farm life, it just wasn't right for my future. So I moved back to Tennessee and majored in forestry at the University of Tennessee. When I was a senior in forestry school, we took a class on forest protection. And I was like a kid in a candy store. I was so excited. I just fell in love immediately with all there was to do with wildfire and fire suppression. So literally 2 days after I graduated, I packed up my Nissan Sentra and I moved out west to take a job in a remote location in Idaho with the Forest Service. So the job I took was on a hand crew. And if you don't know much about wildland firefighting, this is the low person on the totem pole. So as a crew member, your days are spent hiking many miles in treacherous terrain with 50 pounds of gear, digging line in hot, smoky, dirty conditions, not seeing civilization, and you probably won't get a hot meal or a shower for days. I loved it. I just thought it was awesome. After my first year working on hand crew, I was offered a position in aviation as a helicopter crew member in Minnesota. And as a seasonal firefighter, if you are wanting to work year round, you're going to have to follow the fire seasons around geographically. So I took this position and actually my career in aviation flourished. So fast forward several years to that day on the Tiller Complex fire in Oregon. My official assignment was to manage 2 aircraft that were charged with bucket work for the fire. Unfortunately, due to the smoke, we were left to wait out the weather pattern along with all the other aircraft personnel. As I said, we were put on standby because we weren't able to fly due to safety reasons. And after 7 days of sitting in the field with little shade and very little to do besides push-ups, sit-ups, aircraft readiness protocols over and over, I decided, I guess boredom got the best of me, and I decided to walk down to a river that was close by where the aircraft were parked. This is the Rogue River in Oregon. And I walked down the same gravel road that I ran down earlier that morning. I got this weird feeling like I shouldn't go. What if we get a call and they decide that we need to be spooled up in the air in a few minutes? I told myself, and then I just said, no, that's not going to happen. And I continued on. And closer to the river, the terrain goes from a flat prairie to a ravine. The next thing I know, I was completely submerged in the river, fighting to stay above the surface, gasping for air. I was in excruciating pain and I could barely move. Fortunately for me, a fellow aviation crew member heard the commotion and was able to get me over to the edge of the water. Then 4 other firefighters had to jump in the water and then put me on a spine board, and I was medevac to Rogue Valley Medical Center in Oregon. So I had haphazardly fallen in the river, nearly drowning. And in the ER, I learned that I had 2 burst fracture in my vertebrae, which had caused me to be instantly paralyzed below the waist. And I knew when I was lying in the river with my friends surrounding me that I had really screwed something up, and that this was not an easy fix, and most likely that everything I knew before in life was going to be drastically different. And I really couldn't fathom the thought that that was probably the last time that I was ever going to run. But I was also in shock, and I held out hope that this was just really a bad nightmare. 3 days later, I underwent surgery, and in the denial of all the trauma, I really thought that surgery was going to be the solution and fix the problem. But that was only a stabilization surgery. So there I was, lying alone in a hospital, unable to sit up, roll over, dress myself, go to the bathroom, or move at all. I was completely dependent on others, totally disabled. I'm going to let Adam go from here.
Carly's going to pick that story back up in a minute. Thank you, Carly. Y'all, I don't know if you knew this, but just to give a couple statistics, people with disabilities make up the world's largest minority. 1 in 4 people in the world and in the US, statistics are the same, have a disability. 1 in 7 have a disability that affects their mobility. I'm giving the Southeast statistic because this is where Catalyst is located. But in the Southeast, there are roughly 8 million people with disabilities, making this region among the highest in the country. And this one always jumps off the page at me. Persons with disabilities is one of the only minority groups in which any one of us can become a part in our lifetime either through accident, illness, or injury. You just heard this through Carly's story. Sadly, because of the lack of access and negative stigmas, we would say, kind of like this pervasive belief that the term disabled is the same as incapable, people with disabilities are living isolated, inactive, and unhealthy lives on the sidelines, on the margins of our communities. Take a look at these statistics for a minute. I'll pause for a second and let you read through those if you haven't already. The top two come from the CDC. 43%, nearly half of adults with disabilities get no aerobic physical activity. And I think these two are linked. Health. Working age adults with disabilities are 3 times more likely to have heart disease, stroke, diabetes, or cancer than adults without disabilities. If you did a quick Google search on people with disabilities and activity or inactivity, people with disabilities and health, people with disabilities and isolation, you would see tons and tons and tons of statistics. We pulled these four that felt like they really drove this point home. This one about isolation really jumps out at me as well. I know so many people, I have so many friends with disabilities that this is their current reality, but 85% of adults with disabilities report feeling lonely, and 1 in 8 adults with a disability have under half an hour of daily interaction with someone else. Y'all, this group of people that we're speaking to, this group of wilderness educators, more than most other groups, I would say, should understand that adventure and recreation are powerful tools for inspiring people to live active and healthy lives, right? Helping people discover themselves and their abilities in a new way. We believe at Catalyst that if we can help people with disabilities begin to gain access to these life-changing, life-impacting adventure and recreation opportunities, we can directly affect these statistics. And I'm pointing over here because of my auxiliary screen is where I'm seeing these statistics. But we believe that if we can start to pave the way and open the door for folks with disabilities, we really can begin to see statistics like this fought against. And so this is why we're here today. This is why we believe people with disabilities should be given access to these opportunities for being outside, being active, being with other people, pushing their limits. So how do we do that? Before we dive into the nitty-gritty tips and tricks of how we would recommend starting, we want to take a little bit of time to begin to define this word disability, because you're going to hear it a lot throughout the next several slides. So I'll let Carly jump in and,
All right, and you'll have to
begin this.
pull up the chat on this one.
Yes,
Okay.
I got it.
All right, so what is disability? If you guys want to join in and really just type in the chat some of your comments about what you think disability is, and no Googling, go ahead and just type in some things that come to mind right away, a definition of disability or a type of disability that you can think of. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at this.
Kelly, when people type into the chat, is that we'll see them come through on the questions section on the mobile app?
It depends on if they're typing those through Zoom or the app.
Okay.
If I would encourage people to use the Zoom chat if they're
Okay.
on Zoom, and then I can monitor the other for you.
Okay. Here we go. Boom.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
people start-
okay, good. We've got Zach. He says physical or mental illness that keeps a person from doing certain things. That's awesome. Yes. And impairment that prevents regular activity or participation. Awesome, Seth. Any impairment that hinders an individual from participating in major life activities. Very good. You're teaching my class here. All right. So Yeah. So some other things, learning disabilities, autism, Asperger's, depression, bipolar, anxiety, asthma, diabetes, HIV, cancer, CP, injury. So there's all kinds of disabilities. Can you slide this around?
You should be
The
good.
chat.
Oh,
to move
yes.
it, to move it a
Sorry.
little bit. Yeah. All right. So the ADA doesn't actually have a list of specific impairments that would be considered as a disability, like some of these that we're listing and that we're talking about. The definition is left and Is that because of the chat?
No, somebody
Okay.
just
Okay.
turned their video off.
So let's look at the words italicized in this definition. An individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And we have those italicized because we think those are the most important parts of this definition. The American with Disabilities Act of 1990 is a wide-ranging civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disability. Title III prohibits discrimination by public entities, including nonprofits, requiring them to provide reasonable accommodations that allow full participation of people with disabilities. And we'll talk about that a little bit deeper in a minute.
Here, just hit this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hold on. There we go.
So what are major life activities? Again, we'd love for you to join in on the chat and put some things in the chat that you think are major life activities.
Boom, walking, yeah.
Awesome. Walking, eating, driving a car, learning, very good. Yes. Dressing, working. Yep, you guys got it. Going to a store, brushing teeth. Yes. Connecting with others, sleeping, social interaction. Awesome. These are all great. So major life activities, and I'm actually not going to read the first paragraph because a lot of you have posted in the chat what that is, but I will read the bottom. It also includes the operation of major bodily functions such as the immune system, normal cell growth, digestion, bowel and bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive functions. And I want to read that because a lot of times people see a physical disability or a visible disability and they automatically think that person is disabled. But the internal disabilities are very hard to discern. So we want to make sure that we don't exclude those.
Mhm.
All right, Adam, you ready to take this over?
Yeah. Yeah, so the other italicized word that was in that definition, we talked about the major life activities, and the ADA does list a bunch of those, which were very much in line with what you were listing. Great job. The other italicized word in that definition was substantially limits. So let me ask that question. What does substantially limits mean? Maybe I'll give just a minute. You can type in the chat. What does substantially limit mean? Creates a barrier or a constraint by a large margin, Zach. Can do the activity, but not to the normal extent. Substantially is an interesting word, isn't it, in this context? I'll go ahead and say these are all great responses. There's still a few coming in. A significant disadvantage. Ryan, that's great. The ADA does not provide a clear definition here for this. We feel like it's pretty intuitive. I mean, all of the answers you're giving, modified activity, preventing someone from accomplishing a goal or task, this idea of being substantially limited is pretty intuitive. However, we would say that it is still vague and there is still some question, especially when you get into that term substantially. Someone might be limited in one environment, right, but not in another. Y'all, we believe that one of the main reasons that someone might be substantially limited is because, quite honestly, of the limiting nature of that environment. Disability might impact certain bodily functions or major life activities like we read, like eating or communicating. But we believe that if we can shape how limited they actually are by taking steps to tear down those limiting factors. If we can fix the environment, then in some ways we begin to, people begin to not be so substantially limited, right? The thing we want to drive home here, that I want to drive home here, is that we have to begin looking at ourselves and the lack of accessibility in our world. People with disabilities live with conditions that impact their ability to engage with the world as it currently is. And that's not going to change in most cases, right? Therapy can do so much, but it gets to a point where people with disabilities are as they are. And unless we start to fix our environments and begin to make our world more accessible, then there's always going to be a barrier. So our job as friends and neighbors and family members is to identify those places in our lives, in our communities, in our programs, in our facilitation, and do our best to begin to fix those inaccessible environments. So I know what you're asking. All right, I get it. Adam and Carly, how do I begin to do that? How do I begin to open that door and begin to create accessibility for people with disabilities in my programming, in my neighborhood, in my life? Oh man, I forgot an important part of this. I'm going to let you look at this cartoon for a minute. This I think this drives home the point that I just kind of made there. But if we can create accessibility, it not only helps and provides opportunities for folks with disabilities to engage in our communities and in our lives, but we can all use those same supports to maybe make life more efficient in general as well. This is kind of a classic cartoon that's used often in conversations like this. But if we just spend time focusing on cleaning the ramp, we could all get in and then go back and fix some of the other places in our communities. So that'll be in the recording. So you'll get a chance to go back and look at that cartoon or use it for future stuff. So how do we become more accessible? We're going to take a look from now on. What are we at? 25 minutes. We're going to take a look from this point forward at 3 areas that we feel are kind of the main areas that we can begin to unpack some strategies and recommend certain strategies for creating access in these areas. These 3 areas: social and emotional access, cognitive and intellectual access, and then finally physical access. Let's start with social and emotional access. When we talk about creating social and emotional access, we're talking about creating an environment of belonging and respect, a place where people with disabilities are treated as people, a place where they're honored and respected for who they are, exactly as they are. This sounds kind of lofty and complex, but the truth is it's not. And I'd be willing to say that many of you are already doing many of the strategies and tips that I'm about to show you and that we're about to walk through. But I think one of the best ways we can open this conversation is by showing you a video. So I'm going to flip to the next slide, Kelly, and it's going to automatically kick off a video, I believe. So I'm hopeful that y'all will be able to hear this and this is going to work. We'll watch the video and then we'll spend a couple slides here unpacking this video.
Good morning, Bob. Good morning there. Man. Morning, Alice! There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone. Attention!
Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not. If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take mine?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
But please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't underestimate me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath, relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi. Would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human. There's no need to be awkward.
Yeah. So I feel like I could end this section right here and you would get the point, but maybe we'll spend a little bit of time just running through what you heard and kind of unpacking a little bit of it, a few of these items. But how do we now create an environment of belonging and respect? How do we let people with disabilities know they belong and are respected? First, as you heard, we treat people with disabilities the same as we would anyone else, treating people with disabilities as people. Y'all, all of those social norms come into play here, asking them their name and going from there, getting to know them the same way you would get to know anyone else. You get the idea. Just know that in this, some people's impairments aren't always physical, as Carly mentioned earlier, and they can't always be seen. So don't assume that people with disabilities will look or act or respond necessarily in a certain way. I was just quickly breezing through the comments on the YouTube page of this video last night, and I came across a couple quotes. This quote in particular jumped out to me in terms of this topic of treating people with disabilities as people. This person said, "I have high functioning autism, and I find it amazing that people will treat me just like everyone else until they find out or realize it. Then it's all slow talking and over explaining and overall awkward treatment. There are people with much more obvious disabilities than me, and I can't imagine being treated like that all the time." There's also a recommendation. I have a film recommendation, and I want you to write this down because I don't have the chat in front of me, and I don't want to take a second to cut this out, but there's a movie called The Intouchables, The Intouchables. And you can just quickly Google The Intouchables. I would love to show you the trailer to this, because I think it really drives home the importance of this, this idea that people with disabilities want to be treated just like everyone else. But it's actually originally was a French film, and so it's a subtitle film. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing film. It was recently redone in Hollywood. I have not seen the newer redone version, but the one I would recommend is the French version for sure, called The Intouchables. Go watch it. At least go watch the trailer at some point today. Second, have a person-first mentality. We say person-first mentality. Some of you may have heard of this in the disability community. There's this respectful language that's often recommended, referred to as person-first language. We say person-first mentality because we believe that using person-first language begins to help us act in a way that's person-centered. I'll explain what I mean in just a minute. But person-first language, you can see some examples here. Person-first language in the left column, non-person-centered or person-first language in the right column, disability-focused language in the right column. I'll let you take a look at a few of those. Recommended to say people with disabilities versus the disabled, the handicapped, crippled. All of those terms that we know are demeaning and devaluing. Again, the idea here is that we believe that by using language that puts the person first, the person before their disability, focuses on the person, then it will begin to help us start to make a mental shift and a physical shift into acting out that person-centered approach. And I'm going to tell you a story in just a minute, but don't get too caught up on this and let it make you nervous about what you say. Y'all, we all say things that offend people. And quite honestly, recently there's been an uprising in what's called identity first language, especially from the autism and deaf communities. Going back to that idea of treating people like people and remembering that we're working with people and we all make mistakes. If person first language offends someone, by all means, ask them how they would like to be referred to or addressed and do that, right? But more than about being PC, the core of this is about focusing on them as people and not getting tied up in supporting their specific disability. This is my friend Sandy. I met Sandy. I was actually running a kayaking program up in Greenfield, New Hampshire, at this outdoor education and retreat center called the Barbara Harris Center. And we had been doing a number of different adaptive kayaking clinics that day. And in the afternoon, we just opened the schedule up and said, anybody who wants to show up, you may have to wait in line, but we have a couple hours at the end of the day that people can just kind of cycle through, and we can help get boats outfitted for folks, get them in the water and let them go for a paddle, with an instructor on the water. And I had just gone through this big influx of people, making lots of different little adaptations, putting foam here and there, doing some hand adaptations for the paddles. Got a big group of people off onto the water, and I see Sandy coming down the hill in her power chair. She's a little bit hunched over, and she's wheeling down the hill. And in my mind, I'm fixing her disability. And so I'm like, grabbing paddles, and I'm grabbing all this gear and starting to make some of these adaptations. So by the time Sandy shows up, I'm like, all right, welcome to the waterfront. Here's the kayak, I would recommend you using, has this great, wheelchair mimicking seat back. We can make all these adjustments on it. Here's a paddle. Here's all the different hand adaptations we can use. I would recommend this. Why don't you go ahead and try this on for size? And as I'm going through this, I see Sandy kind of giving me this confused look. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know this lady. I didn't even, I didn't ask her name. I didn't ask her if she'd ever been kayaking before. So I stopped and I kneeled down and I said, I'm Adam. She said, I'm Sandy. And I said, have you ever been kayaking before? And she says, yeah, I kayak all the time. I live in Connecticut. I paddle on the Connecticut River all the time with my friends. And I've never used any of this equipment. So with Sandy, it wasn't a matter of the language I was using around her. It was my mentality toward her. I instantly went to try to fix her disability without hearing her story. If I would have taken the time to step back and listen to her, I would have known that she kayaks and that she doesn't use any of this equipment and that she has great grip strength and she can just grab the paddle. Y'all, our belief is that by practicing person first language, number one, we'll be respectful to people with disabilities in general. And number two, our first reactions will be to ask questions about them before jumping to conclusions about what they need in order to be quote unquote fixed, right? We're working with people, not with disabilities. So let's move on. Treating people as people, people come first. So person first language, avoiding assumptions, avoiding assuming what people can and can't do, will or won't do. The point here is ask, let people lead. It may feel sometimes impossible or unsafe for you to take someone out into, on a program, but you should involve them in the brainstorming and the conversation before making that decision for them. Avoiding assumptions. Asking first goes right along with this. My clicker's not working very well. Asking first. Always ask before you give assistance or turn someone away from something. If they want help, ask how they would like help and what the best way to help them is. If you don't think they're going to be able to participate, don't make that decision for them. Ask. Right? I heard Alicia Sproul, I don't know if you're on this, but I heard you in your presentation earlier talk about a young man who was blind who came on your program. And you obviously didn't explain what that looked like or how that decision to partner him up with someone came about. But I would imagine there was quite a bit of conversation and asking and brainstorming that happened. So I would be interested in hearing a little bit more of that story at some point. But a great example of asking and avoiding assumptions. Speak directly as you typically would. Speak to people with disabilities the same as you would to anyone else. Avoid speaking to their interpreter, their assistant, as you saw in the video, speaking slowly or loudly, assuming that they can or can't hear also maybe avoiding speaking down to someone as if they can't understand above a first grade level, right? Until you know them, until you know what they need, the approach should always be just as you would approach anyone else of that age group. I have several stories I want to tell here, but I'm watching the time click away, and so we need to probably move on. And then finally, last but not least, and I think this kind of sums up so much of this, is we've labeled it as be a friend. But the idea here is just have fun, be relaxed, laugh, be playful, just like you would anyone else. When you're enjoying yourself, when you're free to ask questions and be vulnerable, others take cue. It's easy to get caught up in being afraid to offend someone. And I know that comes from a great heart. But you're not going to say the wrong thing in a way it's going to completely crush that relationship or completely destroy their experience. If you say the wrong thing, just be yourself and apologize and ask, what they would prefer, how they would prefer to be addressed, that kind of thing. So just being yourself. Y'all, we feel that by taking these very simple steps, and we could, like I said, we could go into stories about any one of these and talk for a long time about any one of these. But by taking these steps in a general way, you're letting participants know that they belong and are respected, and you're setting that stage socially and emotionally. So let's move on. Cognitive and intellectual access. Carly, I promise you I'm going to have this done in 6 minutes.
Okay.
So you got plenty of time. But cognitive and intellectual access. A lot of people with disabilities, as Carly mentioned, and as you know, don't have physical disabilities, even though oftentimes that's where our mind goes when we think about this term disability. Providing cognitive and mental access is about helping people, number one, prepare, and number two, engage with the content and the activity intellectually. So what does this look like? All right, imagine yourself, you show up to your first surf lesson and your instructor throws you a wetsuit and a board and says, suit up, we're paddling out in 5 minutes. And the waves look like this. How would you feel? Pretty intimidated, right? Where do I even start? Sometimes our experiences at some level can feel like this to people, especially people who aren't used to paddling a kayak, going rock climbing, going backpacking. If there's not ample time spent helping people prepare mentally and emotionally, it can feel like this to people. We don't know what we don't know, and the feeling of the unknown is really overwhelming. So, and quite honestly, prevents people from engaging and I would say performing to their potential. So this idea of helping people prepare mentally and emotionally is a big deal. And whether it's people with disabilities or not, I think all of you would agree, this is the case for all of our participants. So starting with that, helping people know what to expect. As you'll see here, I'm going to break this up into kind of two sections: before the program and during the program. Helping people know what to expect before the program. Doing a thorough intake. This is really all about knowing your participants. Find out about their communication styles, their strengths, their previous experience. Sandy, have you ever been kayaking before? That would have told me a whole lot and would have allowed us to get on the water much faster and more effectively. Learn about their overstimulation strategies, behavior management strategies. If you go to Catalyst Sports page and you go through our registration system, you can log in as a member, and I don't want to jump the gun and say this, but if you begin to go through the process of registering as a participant, and yes, you can do this. If you go through the process of registering as a participant, you'll begin to see all the questions that we ask in this intake process. And I think it would be a great place to start. If you'd like a copy of that, I'm happy to send that to you so you can send us that in the questions. But doing a thorough intake is going to be very beneficial in helping folks and yourself begin to know what to expect. Coupled with this, having pre-programmed phone calls. This is all about following up on any red flags and getting that get thrown through that intake process. And it also allows them to begin to ask questions of you so that they can begin to kind of formulate an idea in their mind of what to expect when they show up at the rock site, at the program site, that kind of thing. This is really going to help people mentally and emotionally prepare in a big way, both of these two together. Sending logistics, help sending details about what to bring, what to expect when they get there, who to look for when they get there, timeframes, locations, how to contact you if they're going to be late. All of this information is going to help folks reduce anxiety and let people enter the event with optimism and quite honestly, a hopeful attitude and bring their best selves. We'll talk a little bit in a minute, in the next slide actually, about using visuals, maybe actually even in this slide. I can't remember if we get there now, but one of the ways I've seen this done before we did this at Waypoint was we would even shoot little intro videos of actually walking into the climbing gym, checking out or checking in with the desk, getting a pair of shoes and a harness, walking over and getting into the group circle. And so when folks would say, hey, my son or daughter's a little bit nervous about what this is going to look like, and it actually may prevent them from showing up, we'd shoot them this video and say, here's what it's going to look like. They can walk right into the gym right now virtually. And then when they show up, it's going to look very similar. So then, you know, again, they know what to expect and are more prepared. Hey, look at that. There it is. I should have just looked at my next point, but sending videos or pictures from previous programs, or, you know, making videos of what it's like to kind of go through the process of showing up and entering into your program. During the program, what can we do during the program? Walking participants through the schedule for the day. you can see over here on the right side is a picture schedule made from a software called Boardmaker, Mayor Johnson Boardmaker. And this is a pretty common, especially when working with folks with autism, youth with autism in particular. This is what many school classrooms are using, but this is an example of a schedule for an indoor climbing program or an outdoor climbing program. When you show up, we're going to circle up and we're going to go through names. We're going to get ready to go climbing. So we're going to look at equipment, maybe try the equipment on. We're going to watch someone go climbing. So we're going to do a demonstration. You're going to get a chance to see what it looks like. And then we're going to go climbing, and then we're going to go home. And so this provides an opportunity for folks who may be a bit nervous about what to expect throughout the program. They can have this with them. You can continue to walk through this with them. You can use a little Sharpie marker and cross off where you are in the day's schedule. This is a very simplified schedule. Some of them can be more detailed. You can write as much information as you'd like on these schedules, but the big point here is helping people know where you are. Making folks aware of expectations, behavior expectations, what to do, what not to do is an important part of knowing what to expect. Demonstrations, I mentioned this video demonstration as an important part. And that's it. So helping folks know what to expect. You're helping people know how to prepare mentally and emotionally. You're helping them prepare mentally and emotionally, sorry. Now, engaging with the content, the second part of that. And I'm watching my time, Carly. I'm backing up here. Speak literally. Sometimes figurative language is confusing for folks. So being as clear and to the point and literal as you can is a great strategy, especially in introduction circles, describing, certain skills like how to paddle a kayak, that kind of thing. Being very literal with your language is a great skill or great trick and tip to use. Repeating information using simplified wording. If you're getting confused looks as you're teaching or as you're demonstrating things, you can simplify things, rephrasing things and simplifying them to help people understand. Being persistent. Don't quit. Sometimes it's hard when people have certain communication disabilities. It's easy to sometimes just give up and say, oh, okay, let me just show you, or don't worry about it and just walk away and go do something for them. Maybe it's you're asking them to go get a paddle and go line up with everyone else, and they're having a hard time understanding what you're asking them to do. And it's easy to just say, oh, don't worry about it, come with me, and you kind of walk them through the process. But sticking with your communication, not quitting, even sometimes when it's awkward. Using pictures and demonstrations, I mentioned that earlier. Having multiple means of conveying information. If you've ever heard of, it's a strategy called Universal Design for Learning, an organization called CAST. You should do a quick Google search on CAST's Universal Design for Learning, and there's quite a bit of information around providing multiple means of conveying information. Teaching in small chunks. This is really all about recognizing that some people can only understand and take in 1 to 3 instructions at a time. Maybe it's one instruction at a time. And so if folks are having a hard time following multi-step directions, backing up and just giving 1 instruction at a time. And then reducing environmental stimuli. The example I always use here is indoor climbing gyms. I know many of you are running wilderness-based programs, but if you're in the front country or in a more urban environment running programs, trying to find ways to reduce environmental stimuli, like asking the gym to turn down their music, is a great way to help people stay focused. So these strategies are a few introductory ways to help folks begin to engage with the content that may have intellectual or developmental disabilities. Carly. Last but not least, third.
All right.
Creating physical access.
Yes. All right. So in the adventure world, it's a little bit tricky. There's costs, there's barriers to equipment, travel, accessing the opportunities. So back to my story a little bit, and I'll probably have to make it a little more abridged because Adam talks a lot, but we like him. So I spent 2 years focused on rehab, and I was introduced to adaptive sports during that time, but I really wasn't mentally prepared or ready to move forward. And then at some point, I was introduced to mono skiing, which is a form of adaptive skiing at a ski clinic, and I decided to give it a chance. So despite the steep learning curve, I went on out and got back out on the mountain and learned to ski alongside my friends, and I thought it was awesome. This opened a door for me that really I hadn't previously been mentally ready to go through. And then in the summer of 2005, I was invited to do a local triathlon, and I had to borrow equipment. It took me a while to figure out what I was even going to use, but I was able to procure some equipment to swim, bike, and run, and the community was amazing, and I just had a great time. And this was really the catalyst for me to kind of get back into my life and to find a part of myself again that I had lost and left out on that mountain in Oregon. But here's the thing about physical access and equipment. It took me 4 more years to get my own equipment. This was pre-social media. This was before I was able to, just do a search and see what was out there. So that was 2005. Finally, in 2009, I was able to get a sponsorship and acquire a hand cycle and a racing chair. And after that, I just took off. That was my identity again. And I trained and was able to go to some Olympic training camps and made the national team in triathlon and cycling, and competed nationally and internationally, winning national championships and a world championship silver medal in cycling. And then in 2012, I met Eric Gray, who's our director with Catalyst, or he's the founder of Catalyst. And he brought up this thing about climbing. And I had never really done much climbing. I'd done some rappelling. And so I thought it was a great idea. And in 2014 through 16, we had our own team. Catalyst had a team, and I competed in nationals and got an invite to world championships all 3 years. So since that time, we've really seen a blossom in adaptive sports. And I think a lot of that does come from social media. So you don't have to work as hard to find how you're going to get equipment and gain access. But what we want to do is we want to break the barrier down and be able to provide the equipment for people that can't. I mean, a lot of folks who are who are disabled are have a limited budget. They have medical bills. They have outstanding expenses beyond what the able-bodied person has. So we want to try to eliminate that barrier and give them the opportunity by providing equipment.
Trying to get to the next one. Sorry.
So here's some examples. I'm going to fly through these because I have 4 minutes. Kayaking. So these are some things that we do with our programming. We can add a tandem paddler. We can add a hand paddle, like adaptations, like he was talking about with his friend. Supportive seating. This is really important for people that don't have really great balance. Move me along here. I got it. Okay, so hiking. You can see I'm on the left here in this off-road wheelchair. This has been a game changer. This is a Grit Freedom Chair. This allows you to have independent mobility, but also there's trail handles which allow for someone to push you. And then the other two are off-road chairs that allow other people to push folks who can't push themselves, or push and pull. Mm-hmm. And sorry, we don't have enough time to really go into depth on those.
That's fine. Kelly, how much time do we have?
About 3 minutes.
Yep. Okay. So the next one is mountain biking. And I will just say that this right now is probably one of the fastest growing adaptive sports. And it's amazing to be able to get people off the pavement. There's a huge difference between rolling on a greenway and getting out in the dirt, especially coming from somebody like myself who really enjoyed being out in the wilderness. So we have a trike, which is actually a foot pedaled bike, but it allows for someone who maybe can't ride an upright bicycle. Then we have the prone hand cycle and an upright hand cycle. So all of these just provide great access. Mm-hmm. Then rock climbing, I'm just going to tell you that with Catalyst, we can totally help you set up your rock climbing situation for people of all abilities. Rock climbing is such a versatile sport. You really, there's no one that can't climb. Okay, so this is very similar. This slide is very similar to what Adam already talked about. And I just want to say, really, make sure that you are going through your intakes and really planning a lot in your programming. And just because somebody has a disability does not mean that we are fragile. We want to be challenged. We want to have the opportunities to challenge ourselves. So everybody deserves that right. And we want to be able to have successes and failures. Mm-hmm. So just remember that when you're working on your programming. And
I think we can just go to the next one.
Yep, I'm going to do that. So I'm sorry, we really didn't have time to go into questions, but if you have any questions, just know that my story is here to help you bridge the gap. You can become disabled at any minute. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we include everybody in all of our aspects that we can in life to be able to provide opportunities for them. Catalyst is here to help you, and we would love to talk further about how to include everyone. Adam?
Yeah, no, I think you said
2
it.
seconds.
Thank you, y'all. Thank you. There was a lot of content here. I know. I hope that it was helpful. And as Carly said, we're here. Obviously, we're working on launching this consulting arm, and so for larger engagements, we can talk about what that might look like in terms of site assessments, in terms of curriculum assessments, in terms of trainings, longer trainings. We're happy to do that. If it's simple questions, if it's, some simple back and forth, don't hesitate to reach out. We want to make this possible for you. And obviously we want to make the world more accessible. So we are here to help. And there's our contact information there and the website for the consulting arm of Catalyst. So thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Adam, Carly, this was amazing. I teach I have some of my students in attendance in one class, and I wish my other class was in attendance as well. Really great picture to think about inclusivity, including the chance to fail and try and get off the payment. So just really, really great job. And thank you again for sponsoring the conference. And thank you for all of you who attended. We got 10 minutes until the next session. So we'll see you in 10.